So finally on our panel, we've got Liz Clegg, who's founder of MEENA, which means love in Pashto. I hope I'm not taking over all your talk as well. And he's also been involved in the Unofficial Women and Children Centre in the Calais Jungle. And the MEENA Centre, which is in Birmingham, is kind of opening around about now, so it's brilliant that Liz has managed to, as we speak, so it's managed to be here today, all that's going on. So, welcome to Liz.
Well, thank you for inviting me over to speak, and it works out quite well because you work with some of the older children, whereas a lot of my work's been with, how many did you say, 14% of them?
13 below 14 years old.
Yeah, so 13%. So most of the work that I've been doing is with that 13%. I arrived in the camp in France, known as the Jungle, in 2015, thinking I was just going to deliver a few tents to some blokes, and then discovered that there were actually quite a significant number of women and children, and sadly, no meaningful response from any main agency, so I stayed and set up a kind of secure area within the camp for women and mainly younger children, but also we supported some children that had quite severe mental health or post-traumatic stress disorders. Following the destruction of the camp, we were already supporting people that had arrived in the UK, and we decided to set up a project in Birmingham where quite large numbers of people are placed initially, but also there's quite high numbers of unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, and also children brought over under the Dublin regulation to be placed with a family member. So we set up a centre, and we are slowly but surely opening the doors. Once I've got the fire alarm system properly up and running, we'll be right. Following on from what people have said, I was just kind of having a look today, and the numbers are still high, even though maybe it's not so much in the news anymore because of the destruction of Calais. It doesn't seem so relevant to the British public, so we're not hearing that much about it anymore, but thousands of children are still not receiving protection across Europe. We're seeing there's a number of programmes that our government have set up, resettlement programmes that we've kind of signed up to, including a vulnerable persons, the Syrian resettlement programme, and we agreed, I believe, to take 20,000 people, I think, in that region, but we still haven't really achieved particularly high numbers. We are taking people, but not very quickly. There's another programme that we signed up to called MEENA, funnily enough, MEENA, Middle East and North African Resettlement Programme, where they were targeting children, but those children could be with families, and we were going to take the most vulnerable and bring them over here. I'm not sure if we've actually achieved any at all on that programme. We have,
we're just
recently.
at the moment, yeah.
Right, so we did it a while ago. That's pretty slow thing. One of the other programmes that we signed up to, again, quite a while ago, was the Dublin reunification. And this was where, for where we're coming from, the one part of that is where a child somewhere in Europe, a country that signed up to the Dublin process, was unaccompanied, but had a immediate relative, for example in the UK, would be able to apply to have their asylum transferred to that country, so that they would be able to be with that relative whilst that third country dealt with their asylum claims. So this was something that we signed up to a while ago. Again, it has been very, very slow to manifest, and there was some success established in the Calais camp, which I think the majority have come from Calais. But again, there are many, many children across Europe with a legal right to be brought to the UK due to their relatives being here. But again, the government is dragging its feet. And again, that's quite worrying because it's noted across Europe that again, there's thousands of children receiving no protection whatsoever. And a lot of the camps that we see in Greece that are run by the UN are really not up to the job. And very sadly, I think a couple of months ago, a 4-year-old child froze to death in a UN tent in Greece. So we know that the conditions are horrendously poor, and it's upsetting when we know they've got the legal right, and you know there should be an easily accessed process for these children to be brought over to the UK, because we know that the conditions here are a lot better, not perfect, but a lot better. The other thing that we kind of try to promote, interesting to talk to you about, is the need for Europe to recognise that children are not necessarily going to be claiming asylum in the countries across Europe, and we have to accept that these children are in transit. Many of these children, particularly the younger children, so we're talking about the youngest unaccompanied child that I supported was 7 years old. There was quite a decent amount of 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds, so in the hundreds in Calais. These children can't, and we recognise it in law, don't we, that these young children can't make decisions kind of autonomously. You know, they are led by parents or other adults or influenced, and it's quite difficult. And we recognise that in law, that children don't make decisions necessarily on their own. So these children have been sent and been told to get to the UK, these particular children, and that's what they're going to do. And no amount of trying to persuade them that it's dangerous or anything else is going to stop them. So we feel quite strongly that Europe needs to recognise that we have quite a large group of children in transit, and it is no excuse not to protect them where they may be at any given time across Europe. We believe, and children have the right under various conventions for us as Europe to protect them, and it describes that we should never discriminate against a child based on their status, and yet we still across Europe do not offer protection based on the fact that the children are not physically claiming asylum. So it's something that we try to bring to light and challenge across Europe. So, like I said, there's been significant spontaneous arrivals in the last 2 years of unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, which has brought about the UK's transfer scheme. So, when anybody arrives in the UK, when a child arrives in the UK, wherever they land and wherever they go for protection in the country, it's that local authority that is then statutorily obliged to take in that child. So obviously the South East has taken the biggest hit. So Kent traditionally for many years have taken in asylum seeking children, and of course have been severely overwhelmed. So finally the government recognised that they were way over capacity, and they set up the UK transfer scheme, whereby other local authorities could accept children that had already arrived here, and the government and local authorities could move these children around. There weren't guidelines around, not moving children that had already settled in various places, but sadly, and with just about everything the government appears to be doing with these children, that didn't go to plan, and a number of children were moved after having settled elsewhere in the UK, which again was quite traumatic to, once you kind of settled down with a foster carer or started school and started to, find your feet, to be moved away from where you got to know a little bit was quite traumatic. So what we, again, we support mainly younger children arriving in the UK, and you know, we were in the camps in France, and it was shocking. There was no child protection, there was no support for these children, so obviously the UK does take children in immediately when they're found, and they certainly find them homes, and they are taken into local authority and of course treated the same as other children that find themselves in the care of social services. Obviously these children have additional needs to children that, British children that are brought up here in the UK, and one of the things that we try to talk to the local authorities about is having a look at their priorities when it comes to taking children in. And of course, way up there to the top of our list is to recognise and support children with mental and emotional health. Obviously, the local authorities have their own kind of system where a child is taken in, and obviously identifying their age is way up there and so important. It's not just whether a local authority sees them to be significantly over 18. It's very, very common that children will be assessed under that. So they're not disputing that they're a child, but they might well dispute what age of child. So obviously these children won't know the difference to a Home Office age dispute to a social worker going, well, I don't believe you're 13, I think you're 16. And again, children are put through some quite tricky, quite traumatic, quite challenging processes way before their mental and emotional well-being is addressed. There was one social worker, quite shockingly, asked us to tell a child to lie because he couldn't find a foster carer, and he was quite tired and wanted to get home, and it was much easier for him if the child said he was 16 so he could go to independent living. So we've seen some quite shocking behaviour and quite ignorant to the level of distress that these children suffer on arrival, because it's very, very shocking for them when they do finally get here. It's quite a shocking experience for them. So yeah, we do try to talk about prioritising what we do when these children arrive here. We've got 2 more minutes. So there's huge amounts that we could talk about children's experiences here in the UK, and certainly it's something that we would like to educate the public. Most of these children, like I say, are, all of them, unaccompanied children, are taken into local authority care, so it's quite difficult to document what is actually happening for these children, because the local authority, it's quite a closed organisation. Obviously, child protection, it's not just an open book, but through the work that we've done with children, and we're continuing to work with young people, there are some quite worrying situations. The quality of legal advice and support for these children, the children's understanding of the asylum process. We see a lot of children struggling in mainstream education where it's not really appropriate and there's no kind of individual learning plan in place. There's numerous issues that we feel we can bring to people's attention, and we feel that there's quite a lot of work to do in the UK with regards to our treatment of these wonderful children. No, we couldn't quite get that to work, so we decided to leave it alone. Foiled by technology again.
That's the thing, you always got to be ready for technology. So I can deal with it. Okay.